Hello, and welcome to another episode of Life as a Piano. Thanks so much for joining us today. I'm happy to be sitting down with Jes Kramer. We chat about synths, about careers, about what our focuses are now that things are starting to open up, and some of the other things we do outside of playing music. If you like today's conversation and you want to contribute to my podcasting efforts, you can head on over to patreon.com/Dutcher Snedeker. There you can contribute at different tier levels to get all sorts of goodies, like early podcast episodes in audio and video format, as well as exclusive merch, a mailed out newsletter, and more. You can also head over to DutcherSnedeker.com to see what I'm up to all around the internet. Feel free to also share this with other keyboardists, key enthusiasts, synth wizards, anybody who might enjoy some keyboard conversations. And don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, all the things, all the places, wherever you happen to be listening or watching this. The support means the world to me, and it shows that you are engaged, and it tells the algorithm to share it with other people. You know how the internet works. So thanks again for your support, and let's get right into today's conversation with Jes Kramer.
That's really reasonable.
It's good. Yeah, I'm definitely like, I don't mind at least, I feel like the pandemic sped up like some of the improvement process in a way, even though like, a chunk of last year just being at home, I was like, well, all I really have to do is, like figure out what's happening in the future, do whatever random work I can do that's in my control, and then just like, they're like, you're a hero if you buy takeout, and you're like, what? I'm a hero for ordering
That narrative
food?
was weird.
Yeah.
Like community solidarity by getting takeout, and you're like, okay.
You're like, I have been wanting to try out this new place. Maybe I'll try like 4 different things.
And then if you like tip well, then you're like a superhero.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, like you tip well, and then like I think, especially last year with like, having to get some unemployment and then the stimulus checks, it was like, oh, this is what it feels like to have like a normal-ish income.
Yeah, those stimulus checks hit very differently for a lot of people. Like, and especially when we started being able to plan on when they were coming.
Mm-hmm.
That I think was a really interesting shift of like people being like, oh, I'll be able to like pay a couple months of rent just off the bat. I'm normally stressed about that every month.
Yeah, it's and I had at the wedding gig, I had an accountant who was he was tasked by his friends, the people getting married. They're like, can you do the playlist for like, we just want 2 songs played, like one for the parents and one for us. And he was just so curious of like, how is tax time for you? And I'm like, oh, it's just great. So many forms and getting paid, or getting forms from like 10 different things, and then having to be like, did I really do this much work with these people?
Yeah.
And then deductions, like, what did I buy? Oh yeah, I bought this looper. I haven't really used it, but it's technically gear.
Right, which you can technically claim. Did you use stimulus checks to buy new gear? Is that one of the things that went toward?
If I were to go back in time and tell, pandemic Dutcher like one thing, I would just be like, hey, you're getting this unemployment, put it away for like, put a good chunk of it away for like 6 months, and then you'll have a Nord.
I wonder.
But I bought everything, I bought like, mic stands, microphones, software, things for shooting video,
Okay.
and then this office. I rent this office. I've been renting it since November,
Okay.
so I was like, well, maybe this year I'll get a Nord and have my gig machine. Because right now I just have my Yamaha CP33 as the main board, and it's like,
Mhm.
okay, weighted action. It's I like recording with it and playing with it. I've had it since ninth grade.
Yeah.
Um, it's just survived a lot. But now I took it to Austin Kane to get repaired because he does random instrument and
Mhm.
electronics repairs. Um, and it still works. It's like it was barely being held together, but we found some extra screws to like fit it back into place and
So it was mostly like
change some parts around.
structural stuff that it needed? And just like a good cleaning or
Yeah, well, I thought it was a good cleaning, and I did a cleaning myself. Like I spent, I don't know, probably because of listening to podcasts, I spent longer than I needed to, but I uh I took all the keys off, and then I checked each key, made a note of like, okay, this one's chipped, I might need to replace it. This one's fits weird, I might need to swap it. And I cleaned you know, the old, like whatever the key grease was, this like blue goop that had just like, been melted in the sun. And then, it just, instead of being like, oh, it's a lubricant for the keys, it just turned into like a sticky glob. That was the reason why I wanted to clean it, because I kept having sticky keys.
mm,
Um, so I cleaned it, uh, and then like re-lubed all the parts, and then functionally it worked. Like there weren't any sticky keys. I could like play more fluidly again. But then I had like 10 keys that just wouldn't make a note.
oh shoot, okay.
And then when I took it to Austin, he showed me that if you go a step further and like turn the key bed up and then like unscrew the I don't know if it's, I guess, circuitry mother. I don't think it's the motherboard. It's like it's the thing that just like the key mechanism hitting the little rubber pieces, and then those rubber pieces like trigger uh the circuit board to like make the note. And then there's like, I guess, two different points on the rubber parts that um how the mechanics hit those rubber pieces and then hit the circuit board. It's like the time it takes from the first one and the second one to hit determines velocity and volume.
Okay.
So he cleaned all of all the rubber pieces, and then he did um, kind of what you would do for like old like NES carts. You take like a little Q-tip, a non-cotton Q-tip, and get some isopropyl alcohol,
Yep.
I think at least 70%, and then you can just clean the contact points.
I just went
Um,
through that with the drum machine I was borrowing. I was like, "This is really sticky. I gotta do the whole alcohol treatment."
yeah.
Make these buttons work again because 'cause I'm really sick of pushing them and not having them come back up.
Yeah, and at least I'm happy, at least there's like those simple fixes, because
Mhm.
I I learned, doing sound, um your brain, at least my brain, something's wrong, my brain goes to, oh, the whole thing's broken, throw it away, and then you walk it back and you're like, no, you just had it on mute, it's fine.
Yeah, I'm sort of in between that. I think there's something we're kind of wired to think that, like, our things are just going to fail in a way that we can't fix them. And then I also like I play a lot of really cheap keyboards, and it's amazing how often it's almost always the power supply or the batteries are corroded or something just like very minor, but especially if you're finding it during a live performance, it feels like the end of the world.
Yeah, it and like especially like I think of your setup where don't you have like two of the same well, I guess you could explain your whole rig, but I know you have like similar pieces of gear doing different things, and like just a spread of different toys to that you bring to shows.
Right, and they all have slight variations of, like, little sounds that I really like on each one, but they're very similar in some ways. But I had a really it was probably, like, 2 years ago, I had a really paranoid stretch because one of my, like, favorite pieces of equipment stopped working. So I started trying to collect 2 of all of
Oof.
my key things. And most of them are downstairs. I basically have, like, 1 set of equipment up here in the studio and then 1 full duplicate set downstairs because, the stuff that I use for the most part is really affordable, but it's not easy to find. I, like, got them at garage sales or on eBay. Like, this is like this is like my absolute favorite keyboard, and I have 2 or 3 of them because I don't ever want to have a show without it. So, like,
This one?
yeah, it's that's the exact same one, isn't it? That's the yep, you have the PT82.
Yep.
I have that keyboard tattooed on my leg. I love it so much.
Wow.
Yeah, that's, like, my favorite keyboard because of those little chord buttons. There's something about them. But then I have,
Yeah.
like, slight variation. Like, here's the PT82 that doesn't have chord buttons, but has a ROM pack still.
Ah.
No, and just, like, all kinds of just, like, little guys that do slightly different drum beats and slightly different patches. But the goal is the PT80, my Casio CT310, my drum machine, my Korg ER1. I have duplicates for all of those because if those fail, I probably can't play a full set.
Right.
So just enough to have, like, a security blanket. But
Hmm.
then
Yeah.
there's some parts of the rig that I don't have a duplicate loop pedal.
Oh yeah.
I've started using bass foot pedals, and I don't have exact duplicates of that. I have 2 models just in case, but I would rather not totally change the sound of those bass sounds. So, but my loop pedals never had an issue. Oddly enough, those Boss ones are just made like you could run them over with a truck, and I think it'd be okay.
Yeah, you could just throw it down the stairs and it just is like, well, it still works, I guess.
Which is good because I could definitely be more gentle with my gear, but it's been. I mean, I think I've had that same pedal for at least 10 years. So,
Wow.
yeah, it's been very reliable.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I feel like, you know, I when I, wasn't using my main keyboard, I borrowed another one for some wedding gigs. And it
Mhm.
was like the perfect kind of like utility digital piano. It was just like it wasn't weighted keys. It was just like a Roland. What is it called? I think it's the V synth. Maybe that's
Okay,
just a
yeah,
yeah.
I've
It's
seen
what
those.
Hannah used to use before she bought her Nord.
Okay.
Um, but having I was thinking when I had that keyboard, I'm like, I don't really have a backup like stage piano or a backup like digital piano if like anything goes wrong. So
It is
I'm
is
now
very
like, okay, if I
beneficial.
get the Nord, yeah.
And this is why, like, large scale touring musicians just have a rider where the venue has to find that exact model for you, and you don't have to worry about yours breaking.
Yeah. And that's what else is motivating me, or yeah, that's what's also motivating me to get a Nord. Just seeing all the people when I went to NAM last year,
Mhm.
uh, they come to the Nord booth, they just plug in the thumb drive into the keyboard, it loads all their settings, and then they just start the show.
Yeah, that's such a relief. But not every Nord has weighted keys, right? It's just some of them?
Yeah, it's like some of them have like the stage piano, those are weighted.
Okay.
The smaller key beds, like the 73 and 61 of like the electro and the whatever the other one is. It's like they're either the waterfall or like the semi-weighted or the unweighted
Okay.
keys.
Yeah, I think I've only played either the semi-weighted or the unweighted Nords, but I haven't had a chance to play many of them.
Yeah, I think I played. I mean, I've played on Hannah's,
Yeah.
and it has a lot of what I want, but hers doesn't have the pitch wheel,
Okay.
which I definitely need a pitch and mod thing.
Mhm.
um, and I've played. I played the newer the Nord Grand.
Oh, I haven't
Um,
seen those.
yeah, it's not like a fake, baby grand facade. It's like it's just like a bulky stage piano, or like a little bit heavier than the normal Nord stage.
Okay.
But the key bed is like, I think it's made by Kawai, so it's just like a real grand piano key bed that Kawai would make, but just on an electric keyboard.
That's awesome.
Um, and that's at West Shore Community College up in Ludington. They bought it. Well, they bought it as a backline option, but they also said it was because they needed another keyboard for the musical. And I'm like, yeah, I wish I could do that. Just drop 4 grand on on
I
just
bet
like, oh, we need this extra piano.
music department money is ridiculous. That's just
Yeah.
I don't know how you get your fingers on that much, but that's a dream.
Right. Yeah. Well, and uh d- I don't know if any of like, because you work at the library or a library.
I
I
work yeah, so yes and no. It's not the public library, but I work for a nonprofit that runs a library and an art center. So we
Oh,
have a bunch of instruments in one building and a ceramic studio and a visual arts studio. And then the other building is full of computers and books.
okay.
Yeah.
And is
So
that like more? Because I know, like, everyone. I feel like every musician has the like, this is the thing that's on top, and then like we all kind of know how to do, like performing or recording. Like we all have different versions of those experiences. But is your passion more like the education side of it, or is it like this is a cool new discovery in the last few years, or?
well, I don't actually teach, so I'm the money
Oh,
person at the organization. I'm the CFO. I do all the finance management, and I feel like it's funny to tell people about my day job because off the cuff it feels very different, but actually like doing math for artists, I think is exactly some version of that is what I end up doing a lot. I used to manage wealthy theater and would
oh,
do a lot
okay.
of those bookings and ticket sales and platform stuff. And then, yeah, moving over to this organization, I feel like I'm good at explaining numbers things to creatives. And that's like when I make music, it is very mathematical, right? When you're building up loops, it's like everything is actually sort of rigid, but it's creatively rigid. And there's a lot of calculation in adding and subtracting when you're using a loop pedal. So
Right.
in a lot of ways, it feels like it's the same part of my brain.
Yeah. Like, and I'm sure with all the pieces that make up the live rig, it's like there's the calculating like beforehand of like these things all work together nice, and then there's the real time that's like, okay, I have to set up this loop, and you
Mhm.
know these are all the chain of events that need to happen, or the thing that needs to be calculated on the fly, or
Mhm.
like I'm finding right now, trying to get used to the Boss RC 505, just like I keep messing up the timing of the loop, and I'm like, did I mess up the quantize function? Is there a quantize function? Like what what do I do?
Right, you have to be so familiar with exactly how that machine is gonna snap into timing, and, like, yeah, that feels very mathematical, like, doing that count, even if it's, like, an on-off beat, and I feel like, using drum machines too, any sort of, like, visual drum machine that's very grid-like, it feels like a spreadsheet to me, right? There's, like, these sequences, that you're layering on top of each other, and I don't know, it's like I love music in many, many forms, but I feel like the stuff that I end up writing still feels sort of grid-like when you break it down layer by layer. It's just like grid-like with like goofy toy keyboards and I don't know, like sort of sounds that aren't because a lot of electronic music is that way. But I tend to find myself going more toward like either organic or nostalgic sounds, but put into that electronic format, if that makes sense. Like not I love a good electronic music like traditional synths and drum machines and these like arpeggios, but I don't end up using it that much because for me it's more so like taking these very like tactile like Casio sounds and building those up in layers and vocal loops too that it like adds texture but still in a way that's kind of calculated along with the length of the loop.
Yeah, and well, and that's I I think aesthetically it's a fun choice to like operate in a medium that's like okay, it's electronic music, but it's not just pre-programming and pre-mixing a bunch of stuff and then having
Mhm.
some live elements. It's like you're kind of seeing how the sauce is made like in real time and like at every show almost and using hardware too. It's like that's a whole different like I think of like all the people who are into like modular synth racks right now and they just have rows of stuff and I'm like I don't know what a half of this stuff does but it's making cool beats.
But also like yeah, knowing that it can go a different direction every time because I think there's a lot of skill in programming those things, but just I want to stay on my toes when I'm performing, and I don't want to find myself just hitting play and singing over it. Like, and I think part of
Yeah.
that is an anxiety reflex too, right? If I'm just singing there and watching the audience, or like not being distracted by the tasks that I have to do, I think I would be terrified. But if I'm staying busy and monkeying with three different keyboards and a foot pedal and these effects over here, it like it's sort of calming in a sense because I have something to do.
Right. Yeah, you're so busy, thinking of how you're shaping a song that you don't, you're not then going further inward and being like, is this all just is anyone like this or is it
These lights
ah
are so bright. Yeah, I mean, I could probably do a lot more choreography if I weren't so busy, but I don't think anybody wants to pay for that, so
yeah, it's just everything's pre-programmed. So now I just dance. I don't
mhm.
even sing. I just
Even my voice is just playing from a track. I'm going to dance
yes.
to this song I wrote in my house. Thank you.
Yes.
And, I've actually seen people do that, and it's very entertaining. I think for me, though, it's just like I need to feel like I'm like actively building something and staying busy. And the challenge of getting that timing right and of like paying attention to those small details. And, the fun thing about playing with a loop pedal is if you make a mistake, everyone hears it over and over and over again. So there's a pressure to build it right. And I don't know, for some reason that's like a
Right.
pressure that feels really rewarding to me.
Yeah, there was I can't remember if you guys were able to do this in person or if it was virtual, but the when it was like you and Hannah and Eli Khan, like I think Steve Leaf, they all did a looping night or something.
Yeah, well, we were gonna do that
Or
with Ian Gorman,
oh, okay.
I think, if I'm thinking of the right thing, and something happened. I think they did it, and it
The
ended up
pandemic,
being
bro.
like we had to move the date, and I couldn't make that date or something. But I think it did end up Or maybe it's one of
Oh,
the things that got canceled in pandemic. I'm honestly like, I lost so much track of what's happened this last year in my brain. But no, I remember that conversation, but I don't think I didn't end up.
okay.
I think maybe it was like a date conflict.
Yeah, oh, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I just thought of, because I did that show earlier this month where Brandino was on it, and I was
Yeah.
thinking like, you know, just his looping style and like
Yeah.
everything he's able to do with his rig. That's really cool. And I thought of that idea of a loop night where it's like, I think the general public, like, they get what looping is as a function. Like as soon as you see like, oh, he did a thing and then hit a button and now it's still going. And then, some people that's enough for them to get it. But then to have a night where it's like all looping artists, you start to see like, oh, this person knows how to do these tricks, or like this person
Mhm.
has this setup to get this effect. It's like really cool to see live looping done that way, instead of just like, okay, like he doesn't want to comp for himself. He'll just record you know, some chords and solo.
Yeah, I do feel like it's one of those tools that it's so interesting to see how people will use it in different ways. And especially like if they're all comfortable with different instruments. I think what I find most intriguing is people who start looping who aren't super comfortable with any instruments and figure out how to do either like a lot of
Uh,
vocals or like I don't know, I don't consider myself super gifted at any one instrument, but I can play a little bit of a lot of things. So for me, looping was sort of like a cheat to be able to play them all for the same song. Whereas, you look at somebody like Eli go up
mhm.
there and like do a guitar riff over, and you're just like, okay, this could go any direction. I have no idea where this is going to go. And we can be using the exact same loop pedal and it's a completely different product. And I love that about it. It's just like I feel like it's such a creativity tool to kind of unlock weird directions for your music instead of I think, for a while when they were new, people sort of sounded like other people using loop pedals because they hadn't messed around with the boundaries that much.
Right. Like they see like one person do it a certain way and they're like, "Oh, that's easy to replicate. I'll just buy that
Mhm.
pedal and or that, piece of gear and
Mhm.
see what happens." I know for me it was like I was just starting to get into effects pedals in general with a keyboard. Um and I had my friend Travis Swanson, he sold me a what was it? He sold me the Caverns by Keeley Electronics, the
That
reverb
one.
delay combo.
Okay.
And I had already had a DL4, Line 6 DL4, and a what was it, the Aval or not Avalanche Run, the Afterneath reverb pedal from Earthquaker
Okay.
devices.
Yeah.
Um and so I was used to like, oh, you push the button, this happens. But then I got a one of those I bought from Travis, the skinny Ditto loopers.
Mhm.
Um and the one that's just like you keep looping and
Yeah, it's no
that's it.
pre-recorded, right? You're just literally building the same thing on top of each other.
Yeah, and in using that with Earth radios, like it was cool because when we were just a four piece for a while, it added an extra layer of texture that I could just like throw an idea, like hit the sustain pedal, you know, toss click on the looper, do some kind of run or line or something with the reverb and delay, capture that, and then like just use it as like a kind of ambient noise
Mhm.
within the song, rather than just having it comp in time with the band. um
Yeah.
but now I bought the RC505 partially because I've seen Hannah use it a bunch and it looks cool, but I also, you know, Mark Rebier just making magic with that thing.
Yeah, I've been really curious. One of my looping heroes is Meryl Garbus from the band Tune Yards, and she
Mm.
uses two RC2s, so the very basic Boss, but she uses them in a way that they're connected to each other in this strange sort of like dual looping thing. So almost making her own version of some of the higher tech Boss pedals. But I've been thinking now Roland
Whoa.
makes like a hand looper that sits like on a
Mm.
desktop. And I was just like, what would happen if I had one at my hand and one at my foot? Like I'm so used to the foot. Like what if vocals all went through the hand one and keyboards all went through the, I just feel like once you're sort of comfortable with the concept, you're just like, well, what if I had another one here? But instead of buying a second looper, what I've been messing around with is creating um, tape loops, and I have some old cassette decks, and then I'll like cue them, and then also have a separate loop going, and
Ooh.
just in a couple songs so far. But I like that because then you get that tape noise, that nice little hiss. So it's fun. Sometimes I'll actually like record something onto my loop pedal that's sort of drone, like you said, adding like textures, and then
Mm-hmm.
record it onto the cassette. And then I can just trigger the cassette at a different time in the song and have it ready to go. But it's just like, instead of investing in another loop pedal, I'm just like, what do I have laying around the house that can make this noise?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's what I'm wondering with your rig. You know, I'm always curious how people find their way to certain gear. Was it like you had the concept of like I like looping and I'm trying to figure out like the sounds I like, or was it always a fascination with like vintage tiny gear mixed with other stuff that was, because that's like definitely a like most I feel like most keyboard players don't start
Right.
thinking like, oh, I'm gonna get a bunch of tiny keyboards. Like they see it as like, I don't like the tiny keyboard because they want to play something a little bit more
Yeah.
involved. But
Right. And
people
modes and
underestimate
stuff.
the power of those gears used in fun ways.
Yeah. Well, so my original setup was very, very different. I would play to, I would bring a laptop and take out a couple of tracks. Like I would record at home, take out usually the keyboard track and the vocal track, and just run the laptop. And this was when I was 17, I think I started playing gigs this way. And I had a Roland Juno D and a Gibson Les Paul. So I would play either the keyboard track on the synth or the guitar track and sing. Um, and at that point, the music I was making was very much based on the patches on that Roland Juno D. So it was a little bit more polished, had a lot of like, kind of ambient electronic stuff happening. But I remember clearly I played a show at a roller rink, and my computer was pretty crappy and it was skipping. And I was just like, I cannot rely on a computer ever again. And had this moment of like, I need to figure out how to do this live. Because when it starts skipping and then you have to just like rewind the track, there's no graceful way to rebound from that.
Nope.
So I bought Boss RC2 after that to just see, like, I wasn't interested in getting bandmates, so I bought a loop pedal. And then from there, I think I figured out how to rework songs enough to be able to do them with a loop pedal instead of a laptop. And then I think I just started like finding little keyboards at garage sales and Goodwill, which is funny because like I had a really nice synth. Like that Juno D was fantastic. But I wasn't finding the sounds I wanted on it. And I know that like this Yamaha Porta sound was like one that I got at a garage sale very soon after.
Oh
And
yeah.
and I was just like, this is what I want to be doing. So from there I just started collecting and getting all kinds of weird little gadgets. I mean, this room up here is just full of stuff that either friends found for me somewhere or I found at Goodwill, or I think like a couple of them maybe I just got on eBay. I was like, I've never seen that one before. Let's find out. One of the Casios that I use a lot, the MT45. Hold on, let's plug in the stuff. has a little like cassette deck right in it.
Oh, nice.
It was sort of designed for kids to like play a cassette and play along. And then it had a little microphone that plugged into like an 1/8" jack.
Oh.
So I actually started writing a lot of my second album on this one. And when I took it to the studio where I was recording in St. Louis, and the guy was just like, I'm not miking that Casio. Please go outside for 45 minutes. I'm going to put a 1/4" jack in it. So he just like altered it for me.
Modded it.
Yeah. And I was so scared because I was really protective of it. And so now this is one of the keyboards that I have a backup of in case anything goes wrong, but it doesn't have the 1/4" jack. So I was like, I gotta figure out how to, because that's one that I use a lot. And you know, that one has all of these really strange beats and arpeggios built into it that you aren't going to find on any other keyboard. So I can either sample it, and I've sampled a lot of stuff just into Logic so that I have recordings of it in case anything ever goes wrong. But as far as playing it live, it's just like plug it in, hope it works, because this entire bass layer that I start the loop with is this one specific arpeggio.
Right. So you need that specific thing to happen, or else it's like, well, it's not anywhere close to this song.
Exactly. People like it won't sound the same. So I don't know. I think I had this idea early on that I wanted it to be a little bit more synthy, and also, I mean, at that point I was writing really different songs. I was writing sort of like conceptual songs. They weren't really autobiographical. And I think maybe when I started to write more about my own experiences, it felt nice to have this sort of like kitschy, nostalgic Casio sound. It sort of it lightens like a heavy topic for me.
Yes.
And I appreciate like the textures of it, where I don't know, you can do a lot of things with the Juno D and it was still really fun in certain projects, but there's like kind of a seriousness to how good some of those things sound. I was like,
yeah.
I don't know that I want that pressure.
Well, and it's interesting seeing like I think I have it here. Justin bought this I think a year or two ago. It's a
Roland.
Yeah, it's a Roland. So the way this works is the key bed is you can detach it from the module, and then you buy, you know, this is the JP08, so it's like a Roland Jupiter module, and it's got all the, you know, all the save your presets, bunch of knobs and faders to like change and shape the tone.
Yeah.
It's got, you know, 1/8" out and MIDI, and you can even run stuff into it. And you could power it with battery or with micro USB of all things.
Oh, that's funny.
And so I see that as like an interesting trend. You know, Yamaha's got like the Reface series, and Roland's got the boutique module. Like you can get the Jupiter, the Juno 106 module. I think there's one for like, oh, is it the MS 101? I think is an option.
Okay.
I think that's the acronym. I'm still like kind of new to synths, but
there's so many. I get them all mixed up.
Yeah, there's so many numbers. Well, and then I just found out too. I don't know if you follow this guy on YouTube. His channel's called Look Mum No Computer, and he's like, I imagine his house is just like a science lab, because he always looks like a distraught, like mad scientist who like every video is like, I made an organ out of modding Furbies and I put them all in different rows, and I had this organ MIDI mapped to the Furbies. And he has another channel that's like, it's a little bit more travel vloggy and not too many project channels or project videos. And one of them, he went to I think it's in Germany, this like big synth warehouse where they just keep a record of like every synth that's ever been made. They have one and that's like if you're allowed access to this room, you can try a lot of these synths. They have one for like demoing, and then they have a backup, and it's
That's
just
incredible.
row after row of synths.
That would be so overwhelming. Because I feel sometimes even overwhelmed, like if you find a retail store that has a really good selection. But if you think about it historically, some of those synths that were made in the 80s that you can't find anymore. I mean, and again, that's the thing. Like, I can appreciate a lot of these new synths, but what I usually want is something kind of like old and gritty. It's not officially mine, but I've been caring for a Moog Taurus for a couple of years, the bass foot pedals. And it's just like I get it. I get why people are Moog freaks. Like you don't find that sound in something else.
Yeah, I don't know if you see I have a sub fatty in the
Oh,
back.
I do. Now that you pointed out, I do. Yeah.
Yeah, that was actually the first synth I ever bought was the sub fatty because I was playing I think I was still with the Gravestones, Hannah Rose's band. And Justin Avdek at the time found the listing, some guy in Forest Hills, and I call him and he was like, yeah, I'm down to link up. And I was like, all I have, because I was still at Grand Valley, I was just a poor college student. I was like, I have 500 and like, I think I had like 570 some dollars. And he's like, oh,
Yeah.
I could give it to you for like 570. I was like, yes, I'll take it. I'm getting $100 tomorrow. Like I'll figure it out. But yeah, like that starting there is like, there's still so much I want to figure out with that that synth. And now there's the extra layer of I bought Omnisphere, which it's made by Spectrasonics. They also make Keyscape. It's like so it's very comprehensive, like dual performing and recording keys and synth software. And Omnisphere is overwhelming because they commission all these random techs and artists to make presets. So there's like 15,000 presets. But then as a synth module, you can adjust it with computer controls, or you can plug, I think it's like 35 or 37 different physical hardware and connect it to the software. And the cutoff knob controls the cutoff in the software, or the filter. Like it's crazy that you can control it with the physical hardware, but then that just adds a layer of like, it's like I really don't know what I'm doing. I'm just
So
turning knobs and seeing what sounds good.
is that effectively like chaining them together, but some of them are software and like if you're doing like a MIDI chain and you're using the effect, but you can go between hardware and software synths?
Yeah, that I in my limited experience with it, I could it's similar to what I do with my live rig. I have a Key Largo from Radial. It's just like a gigging keyboard player's best friend in a way. It's
Okay.
it's a mixer that it's got 3 stereo inputs.
Yeah.
And each channel also has an effects gain. There's a master effects loop control. It has MIDI inputs. It has USB. It could be used as an interface. And as an interface, you can toggle. There's a live mode and a recording mode, and the live mode just streamlines using soft synths and
Nice.
software sounds. Yeah, it makes it easier because it's a two-way. Like you can send in MIDI inputs like if you have hardware that doesn't have a USB, you can plug MIDI right into the box and then it'll convert it through the USB cable.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so it's like a very specific mixer with all of these other capabilities that you might need other converters for. And
Yeah, and well, in using it, I was able to like, I'm actually making a video uh to release at least for patrons right now, and then the public at some point this summer. But it's just a rundown of like, here's my gear,
yeah.
and it peak setup. I could have 3 pieces of hardware running stereo through it, and then I could have my Yamaha plugged in via MIDI to the box, and then I could send a MIDI signal out and chain it to other hardware while I'm also controlling software synths with the Yamaha.
Okay.
And because there's also a separate gain and effects gain for USB sounds, which is sweet because then it's like, oh, I could do, other keyboard sounds or an organ or like, or I could just, trigger tracks and play it through there if I really wanted to.
Yeah.
And yeah, it just has just a million different pieces of utility. There's like stuff for a volume pedal. There's like a master sustain, and like if for some reason you have a sustain pedal, there's a foot switch that you can use as like a faux sustain pedal because it doesn't click. It just kind of like lowers and raises. And yeah, I think I mean, the other modes too, you can toggle mono and stereo effects loop if you have stereo pedals. The recording mode, when you change it from live to studio mode or whatever the other mode's called, you can record up to 192K, which I'm like, I've never needed to go that high, but that's like insane. It's like mastering level quality audio recording or something. And it's just like this thing does so much. It's just this box.
My question is, with this whole setup, where are you putting the loop pedal in it?
Where's the looper?
After everything goes through it, or is this just like chaos?
I put it at least. Well, I sold. I kind of regret selling it, but I sold both of my. I had the skinny Ditto single one, and then I had the Ditto, the 2-channel one.
Okay.
But when I bought the RC505, I was like, oh, just start using that. But that doesn't fit on my rig as easily. At least how I usually gig, where I have like the Yamaha is like wide enough to be like a table, and I just set like a microKORG, and I chain the Yamaha to the microKORG so I can control the sounds, and then the Keylar goes in the center where I can mix the different layers, and then I have the other thing it has is it has a monitor, a separate stereo monitor and main sends.
That's really nice.
So it just does everything I need for a quick on the fly thing. But yeah, I mean, when it was on the pedal board, it was easy. I'd put it after one of the delays. So I'd have like, some sort of coloring, some sort of reverb, some sort of delay, and then that would all go into the looper. But then I would want to add something after the loop, like, oh, let's add a different, deeper delay and like really make a loop sound crazy.
Yeah.
But now with the RC505, it's like I need another table or something.
That was when I added the Moog Taurus to my rig. I had to buy a totally different keyboard stand. I was using an X with an extension on top, so just like to have that double layer. But with that X, there wasn't enough underneath, so I had to get like the onstage like brace double layer one, because I was like, well, if I'm gonna have, I mean, it's like a 2-octave bass pedal. I have a 1-octave one too, but it doesn't have that Moog sound. So, especially if I'm trying to fit that and my looper, but that gets tricky. I'm still kind of trying to figure out the best foot pedal placement for live shows
Right.
because like I'm so used to the looper being right underneath, but I've had to start doing it off to the side. And I've missed it a couple of times in like really inopportune moments of missing that pedal. So yeah, just that spacing is really important when you're trying to sort of build like a vertical rack of some sort or like yeah, keep pedals on a surface. It's amazing how quickly you can run out when you really get going.
Yeah. And just the constant reshuffling of like this fits better here, but now that I bought this thing, I have to move it over here and it's more awkward, but I'll solve like with the microcorg, it was like I was doing 2-tier and like, controlling things separately
Hmm.
and just like, okay, I can chain, like I didn't have an effects loop. So it'd be like, okay, I can I'll use this reverb delay and this for the main board, and I'll use this pedal for the microcorg or the Moog, I guess, because it doesn't have reverb or delay.
Yeah.
And then with the microcorg, I would use like the the built-in reverb and delay. But then that just complicated like to get set for a certain song. It's like, all right, I got to change these to that, and then change the board, and then now it's like, oh, everything's running through the same chain, and I just have to mix in and out different sounds rather than having to like adjust a pedal and then adjust a synth and then adjust, the mix of everything.
Yeah.
It's yeah, less convoluted.
And yeah, there's moments in live performance when you don't have the time to be adjusting that many things. Like if you're playing with a full band, it's a little bit easier, but if you're trying to do something on your own and there's nobody else to like keep going while you're fiddling with all the settings, I don't know. That's always a stressful moment of just like, I have to tweak this. I hope the audience is patient.
Yeah. Please wait, it'll be well, and I was impressed with I I saw I don't know if you know the group Paris Monster at
Mm-mm.
all. Oh, you said yes.
No, I haven't heard of them.
Oh, I've I need to figure out so how quick in behind the scenes. So I'm facing this camera. It's not my laptop camera. My laptop's over
Oh,
here.
that's why you
So
kept turning that way when I was showing keyboards. I get it.
yeah, I meant to say something like I'm not looking away because I'm bored. I'm looking to see what's happening.
Yeah.
But I think I have a little bit of wall space, like right behind this desk area. So I might mount a TV or something as a monitor.
That makes sense.
It'd be fun.
Have
Um,
actually eye contact. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
uh, Paris Monster. They are a duo, and it's a drummer that sings and also plays a Dave Smith Mofo bass synth.
Cool.
And the other dude in the band doesn't sing, but he plays bass guitar, but it's all like he's got a bunch of different pedals and effects, and he just adds texture, like doubles lines an octave up or adds a sub bass, and then uh the entire show there's like different different backing drum and synthy textures uh looped through a modular synth rack, and sometimes their transitions are as easy as like, oh, he just turns down the tempo and then they go into the next song.
Who in that duo is controlling the modular synths?
Yeah, the bass player is kind of doing double duty of playing bass, adding textures, throwing things into a loop, and then messing with the modular synth rack. And then the drummer is the one who, he's the bass player and the drummer, so he's
Yeah.
very locked in,
Yeah.
tight groove, and then he's got a great voice, so it's just like it's like you're watching one person do something super cool and the other person's like, I like that you do that, so I'm just going to compliment everything you're doing.
Yeah. I do really like when there is more than one person, but they almost act like they're still trying to be like a one-man band, right? Just like how many things can I do at once, and then how can we make this work together? And I especially really like drummers who can do keys at the same time. That, I can do very basic drums, but the idea of actually like accurately playing keys while doing that seems like so impressive to me. Granted, obviously you're thinking in the same rhythm section, and that makes sense, but I don't know, that sort of like fine coordination of keys while moving so much on the other side is mind blowing to me.
Yeah, and like the person who did that, I mean, I'm sure there's other people who have there's an example, but I think of this drummer producer guy, Nate Wood. Um, he plays with this band, Knee Body,
Mm,
and he has a solo project called Four, and it's literally like I think he had a tiny desk to demonstrate it all too, but
cool.
um, it's like he's a phenomenal drummer, and then he'll have a bass guitar and some effects on the bass to kind of almost make it seem like it's like he's adding like synthy stuff so that when he's doing mainly like tapping or like slides, it's easier for him to like play a bass line that
Mm,
syncs with his kick drum or something. And then he'll have he has a headset mic or just a mic in general, and so he'll do a little bit of singing, and then he'll like craft beats where he's got like two, I think he has a chord mini log and like one other, like an Arturia synth or something
yeah.
that he can program different sequence triggers, and he'll like play tunes and like like, oh, I'm hitting the hi-hat snare and then trigger something, go right back into the beat while playing a bass line. It's just your head hurts just watching it.
Yeah, that mixture of just like rhythm and percussion, but then also programming it to make sense. There's a lot. It's a logic puzzle at that point. Like anybody that does I think Moog makes them where you just put the little tiny trigger pads on your actual acoustic drum set and have that linked to a synth. It sounds like sort of that same, like it's just like a trigger pad, but you're using it on a snare, let's say. So it's going to make the snare sound, but it will also trigger this sort of like electronic, like tom or something. And just like the infinite possibilities of that.
Yeah, it's crazy seeing because Nate he doesn't use triggers, which I thought he was doing when I first heard about the project.
Yeah.
He's literally like you'll see him like quick turn his hand to have access to a finger and like hit a key and then go right back into a pattern. and and then there's people like my friend James Cannerl. He One of his endorsements is with Sunhouse Incorporated, and they make a ton of like cool pads and trigger points for acoustic kits. And he makes fun, like he can get as extreme as he want, like, oh, replace every drum sound with like some cool synth or triggered thing, or
Yeah.
he'll use it for an effect, like, oh, I'll just make this side snare super verby and I'll just smack it and have like a cool washy explosion.
Yeah, I feel like as soon as you get into this world of sampling and like attaching sampling to other things, it can just like stop making sense. Live performance, you can kind of see what's happening, but you don't really understand.
Right.
No, I think my kid is 11 and he's into like a lot of sciencey things, and he got one of those makey kits, that are just like the little alligator clips that you can put on things and
Oh yeah.
learn about circuits. But at that point, we were like, one of the demonstration videos was like, make a drum set out of fruit, and you like put an alligator clip on a banana and one on an apple and one on an orange. And he actually wasn't even with me one night. My girlfriend and I just like we got the makey out and took a bunch of fruit, and we're like, we're gonna play music. And it's just absurd, but like we're connecting them to like drum kick, snare, toms, but then you can go and, literally connect it to anything. I found there's this online website I like to mess around with called Patatap. That's just like, it's sort of a combination of synth sounds and visuals. And so we plugged it into the USB on my laptop and just programmed it so it would trigger this Patatap site. And so we like had, like bananas, and I think we had a pomegranate and like all these different fruits that were triggering synths and like visuals, and just pretending we were like at a music festival.
Yeah. Just that. Wow. That sounds fun, because it's like, I mean, aside, I'd clip it to everything I could. If I were your son, I would just be clipping it.
Test it.
I would like annoy you with like, I'm clipping it to like everything I could possibly find.
The dog has a clip on him. And
yeah. Yeah. It's like, okay, the dog, and oh, you fell asleep. Guess I'm putting one on your face.
Just poking, and it's like a drum beat.
Yeah. But that was a question that came to mind with working, like you using a lot of older synths. Do you ever, or I guess not necessarily just older, but like I think of a lot of the people who buy those like the cat keyboard that you find in like the toy aisle, and a lot of people like circuit bend those, or just mess around with the interior in general. I don't know if you've ever thought about doing that with your gear, or if it's, I mean, you were kind of protective of keeping them working, but
I would love to learn how to do that on not any of my gear. And in the studio I especially like circuit bent drum machines. I feel like getting that range of kind of crunchy sounds and percussion is really, really rewarding, but I think I'm just too protective of my own stuff.
Right.
I don't know. Maybe at this point I can find a couple pieces of gear in this room that I'm like not super protective of, but for the most part, I think I'm just nervous about that learning stage and like making something I don't like and not knowing how to fix it.
Right.
But about having custom gear, right? Like if that breaks and you've circuit bent it, nobody else is going to sound like that. And that's what's so cool about it, is having a completely unique instrument, but also that means you're never going to replace it.
Yeah. And I think of people like like that look mum no synth dude, or the what's his name, Simon the Magpie. He's I think he's Eastern European.
Okay.
And he his YouTube, like he'll just do the funniest, weirdest like projects. Like he did a series where people would just send him toys, like action figures with like voice commands or whatever. Like, oh, it's the new GI Joe, and he would circuit bend it and turn it into a pedal. It's like, this is the GI Joe fuzz now.
That's awesome.
Or he made a which I've thought about playing acoustic pianos, or like, when you hold down the sustain pedal and you sing into a piano, and there's like the reverberation from just the body of the piano, but also the sympathetic vibrations from the strings. He took it a step further and like turned an old upright piano into a reverb chamber.
Cool.
And he had like a ton of, I think he had every key was just like wired up to like, any part of the signal he was sending into the piano. It would hit, some part of the piano. It wasn't like, oh, I only have 12 keys synced up, so you're only going to hear this register. So it was really cool, like hearing him like sing, and then the piano was like the amplifier almost.
Okay. Yeah, I like that reworking in that way of like, we're so used to this instrument being used in this way, but also, and I mean, a lot of folks do that in really simple ways with percussion, right? Of like, keyboard players that use an acoustic guitar as percussion, or I've started like, I'll sometimes play ukulele and loop it, but then there's something really strange sounding about how the pickup sounds if you like sing into the cutout hole, and how that pickup. So sometimes instead of just like picking up my vocal mic for a loop, I'll do it into the ukulele pickup, because that weird little reverb is just something that like adds a little bit different texture than what I would with a. Otherwise, I get reverb from the mixer that I'm running into all of my keyboards and microphone into the loop pedal. I'll have reverb on there, but you know that sounds like very digital reverb. So yeah, finding sort of like natural shapes of an instrument that you can utilize in different ways.
Yeah, and being at NAM last year, I worked with Cusack Music's booth,
Mm-hmm.
and the booths nearby. It was Cusack was part of like I think it was the Delicious Audio magazine or website, whatever the publication. It was their Stomp Box booth, and it just it was like a big arc of tables, and then different companies were spread out around the tables. And a lot of the trend, it seems like, is just, like you can only develop so many, like this is a reverb pedal. It's like, yeah, you and everyone else makes reverb pedals. But now it's everyone trying to either get super detailed with how you can shape tones, or like have some weird way of like control. Like I saw the company that was next to me, this French pedal company. They had a reverb pedal that you could also attach to like mini tanks that you could mount to your board, and then they had a tremolo where almost like a gimmick, but it got people up to the booth because they kept wanting to spin it. It looked like a fidget spinner, and you just put it on the pedal, and you could flick it with your hand or kick it, and it would spin, and that would control the speed of the tremolo. And then little magnets on the ends of the 3 points would like slowly cause it to slow down.
Okay.
And I don't know how many people would use it, but there will be those people who they buy it, they play around with it, they do something cool with it, and then that starts the chain reaction of the internet being like, whoa, he did that, I'm gonna try that, I'm gonna try that with this, I made one out of a house fan. Like
I mean, I'm guilty of loving a good gimmick in live performance. Like, something for me to watch while they're playing the song, they're doing some weird little trick. There's, D-beams were a big like visual thing for a while. I would watch a fidget spinner pedal. That sounds great. I'm trying to remember the name of it. I saw a band once at Pyramid Scheme that had it was a skateboard, but I think the skateboard had like a slide guitar built across the trucks.
Ooh.
And I was just like, yeah, I'm into this. This is great.
Hooked.
Like maybe you wouldn't use it in the studio. Maybe that's not the sound you're going for, but it's something that's like very intriguing for somebody who's maybe in the back of this room deciding whether to pay attention.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like people forget that too with like they hear an album and they're like, that was a good song, but you don't know necessarily like the tricks that got the certain sound, or like sometimes the hours of like, do I use this guitar or this technique or this sound, like what am I searching for? And yeah, so many options.
So much of recording is just trying 8 million things and seeing what fits what you're looking for, and sometimes it's a really nice piece of equipment, and sometimes it's like, I should have done this in the bathroom, like
yeah. Well, and now I see too the utility and sophistication of like I think of even just this iPad or iPad Pro, I guess. There's a where is it? It was on sale. Yeah, this Mini Moog Model D synth app.
I downloaded that as well. Yes.
Yeah. And it's like, what? They packed all this stuff into like an iPad.
Yeah.
It's like there are people who are just gonna like they think like, or they don't have access to like some of the more expensive hardware, but then they get an older model iPad, and suddenly they're figuring out synthesis, or they're looping, or the utility of like this type of stuff is crazy to think about with old gear.
We start some of our students that way. Like when we do girls rock camp at my work, we have a synth module, and we let them try some of the hardware synths, but some of them who are having a hard time figuring it out, we download on an iPad. Like there's like a K oscillator app. There's different sampling apps. I use one that's like Reason Studios or Propellerhead, like Reason, but like a very simplified app version. And I think a lot of the younger kids that are so used to the way the apps are designed can catch on a lot faster to that. But then at the same time, they're learning these concepts of like, what is cutoff? What is resonance? What are these oscillators? Like they can sort of get comfortable with the lingo in a different way and then come back to the hardware and they're like, okay, maybe it feels a little bit more approachable because we've just messed around. And like, messing around in an app doesn't feel as intimidating with like an expensive piece of equipment. I mean, an iPad Pro is expensive, but like, how it's designed to work, that you're not going to like turn a knob too hard or, and it was really interesting to see some of the kids jump into that, especially like some of the kids really loved anything that could sample. And I had them working on iPads for a while, and then we put them on an SPDSX and like had them actually like drumming the samples after they learned how to upload them and trim them. And I think it kind of started to make sense, just like the way that they were thinking about sound.
Yeah. And that's a good, I feel like that's a point that some even like, I don't know. So, not every school has the budget to get certain types of tech, or not every teacher might want to focus on music tech when they're, teaching high school band and they're worried about like, can they play in tune?
Yeah. Right.
But yeah, like the amount of like tech skills that like younger generations going forward are just going to have naturally are like, they're so useful. And it's, I feel like educators need to like learn that, as technology evolves, like even if you don't fully understand it, just getting something for kids to get involved with that way, that just helps, like you were saying, like, oh, they try it on the thing they know, and then those terms translate to the hardware they may or may not buy down the road, but they still have an idea of how to like use it.
Yeah, and maybe it's just going to lead to a generation of producers, but that's still really cool, like to put those tools in somebody's hand and have them just like sampling. Maybe they can't like play a traditional instrument, but they know how to sample and produce and get clean vocal lines, and that all of that technology has become so much more affordable. And we're just sort of in pop music starting to get the Billie Eilish generation of like, oh yeah, I've been producing at home in my bedroom since I was a kid. And it's a different way to approach songwriting. And some things are really missed out in that sense, but like there's still a lot of value in having somebody have those creative tools at their fingertips.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just having, I think of like, the super geniuses like the Jacob Colliers of the world. And I remember the first time I heard about Jacob Collier, I was in like, I think 9th grade, and my friend had showed me a YouTube video where, I think he was like 15 at the time. Or yeah, maybe I was a little older. I don't know. I just remember he was like 15 or 16, and he had already like, okay, he's doing multicam video edits. He's playing like 10 different instruments, but he's also self-producing this.
Yeah.
And I was like, this kid just grew up on a steady diet of like music education, cool, he's a big fan of people like Herbie Hancock and Stevie Wonder, who were like constantly like, oh, that's a cool new toy. Like, like Stevie Wonder with the harpeggi, or the, Herbie helping design synths.
Yeah.
It's cool seeing the product of that. And, he's just naturally talented at a million things. But
yeah, sort of pairing a natural like musical inclination with like a really large curiosity is so awesome to see. And then I feel like then, giving them tools to do like multicam shots, and you can make so many things.
Yeah. And the, with everything getting cheaper too, like the things people are able to create, like I'm fascinated by like the people who can do certain type, like on TikTok or something,
Mhm.
they'll create movements and edits and cuts where all they're doing is just like positioning their hand a certain way, or they're positioning the phone a different way, and they're just used to like, oh, I'm doing a lip dub video, so I'll click it on when I want to sing this part, and then I'll readjust and make it look like I'm going into a tunnel, and then I'll, pull the phone away from my hand and it looks like I'm back outside, but I'll wear sunglasses. Like it's like that's just with the native in-app tools, but they're doing the thing that like all these businesses are trying to do with the platform. Like
Mhm.
they're it's all these users like setting the standard for content, or even like that. I was watching a lot of coverage of E3 just because I was like, oh, video games, those are fun. And the people that I was watching talk about different games and different things, a lot of their points about how companies presented things, like the ones that really understood the medium did the best presentations doing stuff remote. And then other people, they just kind of rested on kind of the bare minimum for presentation. And they kept saying like, like high schoolers are starting to, have really good understandings of video edits, and like people have shot award-winning movies on their iPhones. Like
Yeah.
the barrier to like what is a good example of a thing is constantly raising.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's interesting to see like the technology just like explodes, and then people rise up to it at different speeds.
Mhm. And then I feel like, yeah, just that innovation of like, oh, I'm really familiar with this one thing and I'm gonna try and make it like do this other, or like innovation with different instrument types. But my son's band teacher sent him a video of like I don't know if the person had written the song, but it was sort of this like electronic song. And then this person had like built a Minecraft world that when you fly through it, you're going through blocks that visualize the instrumentation of the song at the same pace. So somehow like built this world where as you come through, I don't know, I think about almost like Dance Dance Revolution as you think about these like arrows coming toward you at that pace, but the different colored blocks were the different instruments.
Whoa.
And so timed it somehow like perfectly where an entire 3.5 minute song like you see these visual cues of Minecraft material blocks. And I was thinking like yeah, this kid played a lot of Minecraft and then got into music and was like, I'm just going to figure out how to program this and I'm going to work on it for hours and hours and hours. And then you have, and it's like, and what's really beautiful about that is like the point there is not to make money.
Right.
The point there is like I want to make this cool thing and show the internet.
Yeah.
Like I love that that's what so much of music creation is becoming, and like those TikTok platforms is just like, yeah, maybe you'll go viral and like, be an influencer or something, but odds are you'll make one cool thing that you spend 800 hours on,
Yeah.
and then you'll just get excited because people are sharing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's that's how I've had to like, I think it's the same like, when you're trying to record an album and you want to put your best foot forward, but at some point, you're just beating a dead horse
Mhm.
trying to like, like I don't need to spend 3 days on a kick drum. I can move on with my life.
I feel like there's always that moment where you're just like, I'm gonna stop now. I could just keep going. And I don't like if I spend any more time EQing, I'm going to fry my brain.
Right. Yeah, if I have to like drag one more thing in a filter plugin or in a EQ thing, I'm gonna just throw my computer out of a window.
Mhm. Yeah, at some point imperfections are going to keep you sane.
Yeah. And there's rare exceptions. Like, I think, I don't know if you know Bill Wirtz at all.
Mm-mm, I don't.
He, he's got, so his most popular video has like over 100 million views. And
No.
it's a 20-minute, like, the title is the history of the world. And he goes through, like, he condenses history into these little chunks, and
Yeah.
then he talks about them in like a goofy way, shorthand, but with all these like when he's talking about like the early dinosaurs, like, or the early organisms evolving into like things that could go up on land, and he's just like talking about the time it took for those organisms to evolve, thousands of years, and then he's just mapping it out with like cartoonish drawings and little animations. And he'll like a fish will go up on land, and uh he's like, well, I can't really live on land yet because I still have gills. And he's like, well, can we all go up? Can we go up there and get food? No. Why isn't there any food? And then the little musical cue: the sun is a deadly laser. But he makes, like, visually pleasing music video. Like, it's a weird hybrid of like 3D animation, like rudimentary just shapes, but then like stick figure art and like, simple animations, but it's all timed to like really like cool arranged music that's just like
Hmm.
some intersection of like earlier pop and like like a sprinkling of jazz, where it's like you can kind of tell that he's got some jazz training, but it's not like in your face.
Okay.
It's just like the way that he moves between keys, or like that kind of stuff. But it takes him forever to make stuff because every video is like, it's a fully arranged song, multiple instruments, mixed, produced, that he does himself. And then he animates a whole video, 4 minutes, 6 minutes, 8 minutes, all to this pre-recorded arrangement. And the product's really cool, but he was even saying like the only way he keeps doing it, even though he's found, you know, success, a lot of those videos get millions of plays. Um, he just thinks like that he's not making it with the idea of like, all right, here's another 4 million view video. It's like he makes it thinking that no one knows who he is
Yeah. Because
and
it's a
that he
labor of
likes doing
love.
it.
I think that kind of like tedious labor of love, if you are thinking about just a product, you want to like shortcut and delegate off to somebody else, but it's not the same. There's something really beautiful about like one person toiling away.
Hmm.
That's what makes it probably, it's like so charming to everybody that watches it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely nice to like it's motivated me to like start planning out some like project ventures that, because I have input in creative ownership of Earth Radio, and same with Blushing Monk. Like, I started that group as a way for all these friends that I'm making that all have similar Michigan jazz experiences in school, and then, writing their own material. It's like it's a vehicle for people to share their music. But now I'm thinking like, oh, what if I made, a little bit more of an effort to do solo releases, like just some version of a solo
Mhm.
release, and just see where that leads.
Yeah. I mean, if you have the sort of creative juice flowing for that, it could be a really interesting thing to follow.
Yeah, I'm definitely feeling it. I don't know if like if you with I don't know how like, because I have just random jobbing gigs all year, but I'm thinking of like sharing new music and playing shows is still like it's slowly creeping. Like, I don't even know if you have, I mean, with a kid and another full-time job, it's like you're just like, well, whenever I can schedule something, but not any rush.
Yeah, it's very much that. It's very much like, and at this point, for me, it's like if it's like outside, I feel pretty good about it. If it, I don't know, but I haven't been able to write very much new material during the pandemic. I've just felt really blocked. So a lot of what I have spent time on is either like random collaborations with other people or taking old unfinished work and trying to like produce it into something I can share. So I don't know. I think, I would love to play shows again soon, but I don't think that my brain has even like processed what that would look like.
Yeah.
To, like, I don't know. I also have just been working like crazy, and I don't know though. I feel like for me, there's something sort of beautiful about then when I finally get to, it's just like it all kind of fell into place for me to like take this gig and for it to work in the schedule and for me to sort of like prepare my brain for that performance headspace. But I don't know. Even doing live streams throughout the pandemic was kind of like, I guess I'll do this and see if anybody shows up, but like shows up in this like counter over here. I don't know.
Yeah,
But
streaming
yeah.
streaming is it'll be an ongoing thing for me to like figure out and dial in, because I like the thought of like if I pop up somewhere and I have a couple pieces of gear and a mic, I can just like interface with more than my immediate surroundings. But I look at like May Erlewine, like she does I think every Monday, and like 300 to 500 people tune into that. Or like Billy
Right.
Strings will do one, and it's like 5,000 people. And it's like, okay, so if you already have an audience, streaming's really easy.
Yeah.
But
yeah, let's try not to compare us to May and Billy.
It's that's the other thing, is like you want to see how the people who do have, or they have a following, or it's like, how do they do it? And then as you're doing it, you're constantly thinking like, well, if only my name was May Erlewine, then maybe I'd have a chance. It's like, no, you could do it.
There's something to be said about that consistency, though. I had another friend that was doing like every Monday night throughout pandemic. And she said some days there would be half the number of people, but the people that would show up were like very vocal about the value in having something to look forward to every Monday. And I know that like it really built her Patreon supporters. Like the tipping was great, even when it was a smaller audience, but sometimes there would be like hundreds of people. And I think it was sort of, letting them know what to count on. Whereas for me, it's like, I feel sad. I'll do a live stream in 2 days. And it's just like, I miss you. And it's just, people aren't going to remember that. We need that consistency, but I'm not complaining. It was always fun. There was always like, a handful of people that were like really enthusiastically commenting to each other, which was really fun. Like there's something very different. You get a little annoyed at people talking through your shows when you're playing in-person gigs, but there's something really lovely about people commenting through your shows because you can't hear it, but they're engaging. I kind of wish we could just do a comment feed at all future in-person shows.
Right. Just get the biggest projector and just put it like at the back of the room where I could see it. And then
that's a great idea.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I hope, well, I hope at least, at some point you figure out a spot to get back at it. Not, obviously no rushing at all, but I'm sure it'd be fun to do. I'm interested in some, like what Skeletones apparently is coming back, and the DAC just, finished off their stuff.
Yeah.
It's like, there's a lot of spaces that are coming back and kind of replacing some of that DIY vibe of like, I don't know how many house venues still operate. It seems like barely any, and not that often.
Well, I've been hearing about some happening recently, and I was just like, ooh, a house venue right now. Okay, that's brave. But yeah, I think it just shifts, right? It shifts on people's neighbors' tolerance. And who's living with roommates who don't hate that. And I think that's the thing with house shows is like there's always some, but it's easy to lose track of them if you're not personally connected.
Right. That's true. I felt like I kind of, when I moved to Kalamazoo to do my master's, I lost. It was at like the tail end of like one mini era of house shows and GR.
Mhm.
And now I see that there's like rumblings of, people who during the pandemic like opened up their house for like, or like their yard for stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, it'll be interesting to see the slow progression back to normal or whatever normal looks like.
Yeah. And you wonder too, like how people's housing has shifted to either allow or not allow for that during pandemic. Like, I don't know, like maybe a bunch of our friends bought houses with big basements during pandemic and we didn't know.
Yeah. Gotta find those friends. Well, yeah, this was a great chat. I can't say if I've ever, I know we've met, but it was probably in passing. And
I think we talked for a little bit at Cresting Brewing once and
oh, right.
But it was never like an intentional, it was usually in a crowd. So yeah, this was great. I appreciate you extending the invite.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll chat again and things will continue to improve in the music sphere going forward.
At some point you can explain that rig to me in person when I can see it and ask very pointed questions about how things are connected, because that's important to me.
Yeah. Where are these wires going?
Follow it.
Yeah, well, I mean, you do a million things, and I'm sure, some people are interested in following what you're up to. Where should people find you, or do you not want people to find you?
Yeah, I mean, if they want to listen to music, all the normal Bandcamp, Spotify, Apple Music is a good spot. Try to keep my Instagram, Jes Kramer Music account, pretty up to date with shows and merch, and especially live streams. I focus on Facebook and Instagram for live streams. So, yeah, and hopefully we'll have some sort of an in-person show hosted there.
Nice. And for all the folks either watching on Patreon right now, my lovely 8 patrons so far, or just, out there in the wild when this goes public, you can support all the podcast things that I do. You go to patreon.com/Dutcher Snedeker. If you are like, I just have this $5 bill and I don't know what to do with it, you could try a month of my Patreon. But there's also ways, subscribe, follow, whatever term of engagement of the platform of your choosing. Just find how to engage. Just do the thing you already know how to do if you like it.
Subscribe, friend, and follow. Thank you.
Yes.